Hi everyone, I'm Mike. I'm founder of Ether.fi. Ether.fi is a liquid staking protocol, and the two things that make us unique is that we're the only protocol where stakers control their keys, and we were the first liquid restaking protocol that's natively restaked. We launched the liquid restaking token about 3.5 months ago now, and have had obviously a pretty crazy run up. I think we're about 1.8 billion in TVL, which is insane, and plan to continue growing.
Hey everyone. Yeah, let's do that one. Hey all. I'm Chris, head of product at Obol Labs. A couple of us on the team also worked on the very beginning of Ethereum staking with the Ethereum Foundation back about 4 years ago now, working on the original staking launchpad, originally called the ETH2 launchpad, still live today at Ethereum, or launchpad.ethereum.org. And that went through a series of testnets, and then eventually led up to the Beacon Chain launch. And then now at Obol Labs, we're working on distributed validators, so the concept of running your validators in a distributed way. We also have a launchpad where solo stakers and professional operators can come in and create a cluster to run their validator with high availability.
Hey guys, sorry you have to listen to me again, but yeah, I'm from Gauntlet. I'm a data scientist. I work on restaking.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, that's amazing. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about the stickiness of liquid restaking tokens, so like ETH deposited in liquid restaking tokens, and then also how liquid restaking tokens differentiate from each other. And to give a bit of perspective, there's currently around like 100 billion ETH staked in total. And around 8 billion of that is in restaking through Eigenlayer. And then we have liquid restaking tokens like Ether.fi, for example, with like 1.8 billion, which is very impressive as well. And that's like a very quick run up, basically. Like that happened like in a very short amount of time. So it poses the question like, how sticky is that? Especially when we're thinking about, probably people that are depositing in liquid restaking. They seek a little bit more risk, and maybe they're also managing their portfolio a little bit more active. So it might be less sticky than liquid staking tokens. So I'm keen. What do you think, Mike? Like, is there any data on that already? Is it too early to tell? And what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's something that we are certainly obsessing over because it's it's important for our longevity as a protocol. And I think the answer to that depends on a lot of different things. So the first thing that's important to understand with Eigenlayer in particular is that there are two different ways of restaking. It's actually 4 different ways, but like the 2 big categories are LST restaking, where you're just taking STETH or RETH or whatever, and you're putting it into the Eigenlayer pool, and then the Eigenlayer magic deploys that to AVSs. The other way is what's called native restaking. Native restaking is you spin up a validator. The protocol spins up a validator. That validator's withdrawal credentials are pointed to eigenpods, which do the Eigenlayer magic, and then you issue a C token for that. So those are actually, in so many different ways, like actually 2 different products. I think it's hard to make any definitive statements about this, but like the LST deposits, which is the majority, I think that's like probably 6 of the 9 billion or something. Like so, it's the majority of Eigenlayer deposits are probably more like mercenary farming, Eigenlayer points, like that type of variety. And it's not unreasonable at all to think that if the rewards after the airdrops, if the rewards aren't satisfactory, the people will pull their capital. That's definitely a big risk. On the native restaking side, certainly that is still always a risk, but that tends to be stickier capital because our goal as Ether.fi, among other things, is first and foremost to be just a really great liquid staking protocol. Even if restaking doesn't deliver, and I think it will, but even if it doesn't, we just want to be a really great way to be long ETH. Like that's how we succeed. If people view us as a trusted brand that is safe, is great security, great integrations, ubiquitous, every DEX, every centralized exchange, every DeFi protocol. If we are viewed as just a safe, good way to be long ETH and earn some additional yield on top of that, then I think the capital is quite sticky. Because what for us at least, what someone would need to imagine is, all right, Eigenlayer airdrop happens, Ether.fi airdrop, AVSs. At that point, is someone going to sit there and say like, okay, great, I'm done. Now I'm going to swap into ST ETH? Like that actually feels like a weird, an unlikely scenario. But it is. It does seem more likely that someone who has restaked, ST ETH into Eigenlayer says, okay, cool, airdrop's done. I'm going to go put that in the DEX now and earn yield that way. So it's just important to understand that there's this distinction there. And I guess hopefully that's some insight on how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, I think we can go into that a little bit also when we talk about differentiation of LRTs, because there's probably a scenario where maybe it's more sticky in the sense that it sticks with liquid restaking tokens, and then there's different strategies of AVSs and so on. But yeah, maybe it would be great to explore next, what could be potential solutions against the low stickiness, if anyone has any perspectives.
Well, actually, and on the first question as well, I actually kind of wonder what the data does look like. I don't know if anyone has that data today. It could be the case that LRTs today are actually even more sticky than LSTs, only because the TVL has been up only, it seems, and maybe there's been slight rotation between them, but not so much exiting. But I think that data today won't really matter too much, because in the end, when AVS operations happens, you'll end up really getting a good picture of what the stickiness looks like. But yeah, and then in terms of the next question, Mirko, so is it how to make it more sticky?
Yeah, imagine there would be low stickiness, which is not confirmed yet, obviously. But what would be strategies to circumvent that?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think about it maybe in two milestones, right? So what's going on today, pre-AVS operations. So how clean your UX is, what do those points look like? How you operate your consensus layer as well, because that's you're not really today worried about the AVS operations. So how are you as an operator at the consensus layer? Are you Ethereum ethos aligned in those operations? Are you running distributed validators? Are you moving towards a permissionless operator set? Who are your operators, etc. So those are the things I think about today, and then maybe in the future, I think it goes heavily towards AVS operations, right? What does that portfolio look like, and who your operators are, and what that looks like at the AVS side?
Yeah, I think the stickiness aspect is a pretty important question. We could probably think about it from two dimensions as well. How can the LRT itself build its own internal mechanisms to continue to drive stickiness, to continue to drive inflow into that LRT? At the same time, they can focus on external integrations with other parts of DeFi. How do I, as an LRT, interact with other parts? What other protocols am I going to be used as collateral, et cetera, et cetera? Both these things can continue to drive organic demand for the LRT. If you consider LRT mechanisms itself, having a good creation and redemption mechanism for the LRT, especially once AVSs go live, will be pretty important in the end, right? How do I facilitate a strong, flexible, robust flow in, flow out type of situation? If I can continue to ensure that, that means I can continue to drive demand into my LRT. For external stuff, right, if I can form partnerships with a lot of the DeFi protocols, if I can provide that sort of external liquidity to make sure that my LRT can continue to remain at peg in spite of market volatility, in spite of slashing events, if I can probabilistically ensure that my LRT remains robust in light of all these different types of things that happen in DeFi, then over time it will stand strong against whatever volatility, whatever changes in DeFi.
Yeah, I think the liquidity is a great point. It's really something I think that can work against the low stickiness. If there's a lot of liquidity, then you're almost forced to stay with that. What do you think, John, from the node operator perspective? Because if you contribute to a liquid restaking protocol as a node operator, then is that stickiness a concern for you? Do you think that could be a potential risk? Because you also kind of you rely on a certain allocation towards you as a node operator, and then if that is maybe like not that sticky, yeah.
I guess there are a lot of node operators in the room as well. I guess right now we're not really focusing on the concern about the stickiness. We're all concerned about, do we get in first? Do we get in before them? Like, right? I mean, we're all friends, but at the same time, we're trying to get into all the same LRTs as well. Like just like when the Lido opened up to node operators, still like the permissioned nature of the platforms will continue from my perspective. But the stickiness is definitely a worry that we see, especially like, you know, if so certain node operators and certain platforms do have like, you know, tight ties or partnerships. And if your choice of platform goes down in terms of like stickiness, then it just kind of like, you know, ruins your operations in a way, because you've been putting so much resources in order to actually like gear up for that platform. But then platform fails, then you have to like, you know, re-steer your direction in terms of BD, in terms of infra, in terms of like everything to other platform, but then other platform will already have other operators. So what ends up happening is like node operators become like, you know, we're sending loves to every LRTs out there, right? Because we don't know who's going to win. And if there is any data that's available in terms of like, you know, stickiness, and if there's any like analysis on how the UX is affecting like the people to stay with like certain LRTs, I think it's going to be good. I think it's too early to tell. The UX of most of the LRTs, from my perspective, compared to a lot of the Web 2 products, I think we're still at the very early stage. So we need to actually wait and see like, you know, how the products evolve. And like from our side, it's more about not about the front end, it's more about how the back end of the platform is created in order to reduce the load of the node operators trying to integrate with those platforms. But definitely, I think going back to your question, stickiness is definitely a really, really important factor, and we would love to see those data if it is available.
Yeah, I think it's also very important that liquid restaking protocols and node operators work very closely together, because in the end they're offering like a coherent product to the end users, which should be sticky in some way. That's obviously the optimal scenario. And then, yeah, onboarding high quality node operators, I think is very important. How do you see, like, in terms of the differentiation, is that a factor for you guys, Mike, and like onboarding node operators, and what type of node operators? What type of role does that play for you?
Specifically as it relates to stickiness, or more generally just working with node operators?
Yeah, just generally, like in terms of like going more into like the differentiation between different liquid restaking protocols now, because the stickiness is one part, and then I think one way that we have to think about next is like, how do liquid restaking protocols differentiate in terms of having more, like being more sticky and having a new position and gaining market share.
So I mean, we want to have a diverse operator set. I don't know the exact number. I think we're at like 15 or 16 node operators. And we want to have more. I mean, we love all of our node operators, but we want to have a diverse set. A41's obviously the best. So what we need from node operators is, we have a couple of beliefs about the future. One of those beliefs is I think that vanilla staking is not really going to be a thing. Asymptotically, as more ETH gets staked, and as block space becomes cheaper with DA and all kinds of things that make it cheaper, the yield on native staking is going to be like 1.5%. That's just it's going to be there, and so most of the yield from staking is going to come from restaking. And I think there will be ways to manage the risk such that it's not substantially more risky than just vanilla staking. And so the result is like there's not going to be these two categories of LSTs and LRTs. There's going to be one category, and it's going to be LST, and it's just restaking is just going to be built into it. But it's going to be much more fragmented, because if there's 1,000 restaking services that LRTs restake with, there's now 1,000 factorial ways of packaging them up and being super degen or super risk averse or whatever, and everything in between. And even in the same risk bucket, there's different ways of presenting that to the user. and integrating into the broader DeFi ecosystem. So there's going to be a ton of fragmentation and differentiation between LRTs, and that's great. That's a really good thing for the Ethereum ecosystem. What we're trying to be, like to speak specifically for Ether.fi, is we are trying to be the boring LRT. Like, we're not going to have the highest yields. We're not going to do any degen stuff. Our goal is to be the sort of safest, trusted brand that people can build on. Protocols, institutional investors. We want to be we believe that it is inevitable with restaking that there is going to be some sort of mass slashing event. It's just there's a 100% certainty that's going to happen. Like $1 billion of ETH just gets vaporized, one day. We can't, us as Ether.fi need to be not in the path of that, because that is like, it doesn't matter how great you're doing. If you have like one drawdown, it's over. Like, it's game over. So that's how we view the market. Is we were trying to be super curated, very risk averse, and that is going to be one of the ways that I think we achieve stickiness. Is because if people view us as a trusted brand, they are comfortable integrating us, and therefore people are comfortable holding us for the long term.
But do you think so? You said like if there's a slashing event, then it would be over for you guys.
When, not if.
But it could also be a very like minor slashing event or something, like kind of a very small incident.
I'm talking, again, AVSs can do literally everything. Restaking service can do absolutely anything you want. So there is going to be some AVS that captures a lot of ETH and then blows up. Like, that's it's not going to happen in the first year because Eigenlayer is putting a ton of protections in place. Probably not going to happen. But at some point, like, our time horizon is like, my time horizon is like 10, 15 year. We want to be around. And sorry?
What about the pegging? What are the odds like if an AVS blows up, like the LRT doesn't depeg?
Well, it depends what you mean by depegging, because depegging typically means it's trading below NAV. But if it gets slashed, that is not a depegging event. That means it actually gets correctly priced down, if that's what you're sort of referring to. It's not going to be 1-to-1 with ETH, but if like 20% of ETH is burned, yeah, it's definitely going to drop 20%.
How will the market react then?
It'll be really bad. No, great. Yeah, this is great. No, it'll be really bad because like Lido doing that is very, very unlikely. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that. But like some super degen LRT that people have levered up 10x, and it's like in every lending market, it's not hard to imagine that creating cascades and instability and all kinds of bad stuff.
The LRT goes to zero.
I don't know that that's necessarily true, but it could get cut in half pretty easily. I don't know that it necessarily goes to exactly zero. Like, there may be some residual value there.
Yeah, but
maybe there would be a bank run, is what he's saying afterwards, but yeah.
Or are you saying like all LRTs go to zero?
No,
Or
that LRT goes to zero.
yeah.
And it just trickles down to the rest of the business. And it's risky. And
I don't disagree.
I know restaking is really hard right now, but I haven't really seen anybody actually addressing what happens if you have a massive slashing event that leads to a ton of selling pressure.
Yeah.
That leads to a wrong bank with the LRTs.
I mean, there's going to be insurance for it. Cubist is building anti-slashing mechanisms. There's going to be a whole ecosystem of risk protection.
Yeah, but not everyone's going to use that.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Like, this is why
that's how insurance markets work.
I think it's important to live with the fact that like there will be a mass slashing event. Plan for it. Survive. Like, how do you survive? The only thing that matters in that context, where there's going to be blowups, there's going to be these black swan events, is like you need to optimize for protection against that, not optimize for high yield, which is what we're going to do. We're not going to have the highest yield.
I think that's really interesting, because then it goes into like what are the different positioning of LRTs. And if you say Ether.fi is like, okay, you're going to be the quote-unquote boring LRT, it's like very high security and so on, and obviously there's a lot of tools and everything to prevent these type of things, but there will also be other LRTs that are going like very risk-seeking.
There already are, yeah.
And in that sense, I think it will be interesting to explore a little bit like what type of like positionings can there be, how can LRTs position themselves, how can they differentiate, and like how much stake can they get from like other positionings and so on. So maybe we can dive a little bit into that, yeah.
Sure, yeah, someone want to...
Yeah, sure.
We should hear from Walter as well.
Yeah,
We're talking about risk. We have to hear from Gauntlet.
I'm excited to hear what Walter has to say on it. I'm just going to add that I think ION Protocol is doing some good work on like developing an underwriting framework for what is the risk for all of these LRTs, and then when at protocol launch, like what is the rate that they would be lent at. So some of the things that they're including, for instance, is like currently at the consensus layer, because that's what we have today. Like again, like are they using distributed validators? Do you have a roadmap for permissionless TEEs, etc.? Like there's many factors, and I think there's probably going to be a whole new list of factors when it comes to the AVS operations as well. And I think Mike is right, though. We're going to see like an extremely long tail of LRTs that are taking high risk. He's saying that some are already taking some now. We'll probably see some like food finance in the early DeFi days start to also happen. So we'll see like a very long tail of LRTs taking extreme risk for high reward. It'll be high beta, and that's probably when we'll see an event that no one wants to see.
Yeah, there's a lot of good points being raised here. But yeah, in general, I mean, just probabilistically speaking, right, a mass slashing event is likely going to happen, right? At that point in time, it depends on like how much is being slashed, right? Like all these things, theoretically, like based on how AVSs are built on the SDK with EigenLayer, what causes the conditions to get slashed, and hopefully we'll know like what the actual magnitude is, right? Like imagine if like, I don't know, let's say like half the ETH of the LRT got slashed, right? It's probably really unlikely for it to go to like even like 40% or 30%, right? Like if I know like what it's going to be trading at, like I'm going to be hitting the buy on that on the external markets like Balancer like immediately, right? That's a free 20% right there. I mean, especially.
The market won't be rational when there's a massive.
Okay, sure, it can go down to 20%. The thing is, there's going to be buy pressure, right? There's money to be made on the table, especially if the redemption mechanism is there. This is why the redemption mechanism is like super like important in the end, right? You have to. That mechanism is very important to facilitating that, close trading with its NAV in the end. But no, back to the original point about, like degen LRTs, like trying to optimize risk. I mean, in the end, there's probably going to be a whole spectrum of LRTs, right? Right now in DeFi, it's a bull market. There's a lot of money from TradFi coming in, a lot of inexperienced, unsophisticated investors. And if you promise them like plus 2% on staking yield, it's probably pretty good. Like they're definitely like going in for that, especially with like, TradFi rates going down at the same time. Plus you get long on ETH. So in the end, right, like because of the composability and the flexibility with all the LRTs, like you can achieve that whole spectrum. You can find that PMF based on how you want your LRT to look like. Like if you provide that a sort of objective function and you know exactly who you're aiming for, what clientele you're like trying to like sell to, then you can find your buyer. And as long as you do like all the external stuff well, like provide that liquidity, provide those good integrations, then you will have strong flow in the end, especially with like all these new services AVS is being built up at the same time.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And in the interest of time, like one last question I want to ask, and that goes into it as well. Do you think there's a scenario for like a liquid restaking protocol to basically offer like 2, 3, or multiple strategies with like different AVS strategies? Do you think that's a scenario where like one brand would basically offer multiple products, or that is that just going to dilute kind of the products or like the liquidity and so on? Because obviously there could be theoretically like a million of different like LRTs or AVS strategies. So I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, of course, we're going to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to also understand the time horizon on this stuff. Right now, there is no restaking. It's all made up. It's just people farming points and gambling. That is like factually what's happening here. And whatever, it's fine. That's crypto. There's no slashing mechanisms. There's no fee like transfer mechanisms. All these things we're talking like late this year is when there's like a long time before like the actual thing gets implemented. Day one, like EigenDA is going to launch without any slashing, so everyone's restaking EigenDA and getting some token emissions. Like that's like the next probably 8 to 10 months. So what's the risk when there's no slashing? Yes, there's some smart contract risk, less so with native restaking, but there's not like a huge amount of risk associated with that. Not the kind of like crazy mass slashing, like, you know, Armageddon type scenarios. In a year, maybe 2 years, yeah, you're going to have lots of AVSs, and one size. So maybe some people will have a strategy of one size fits all, but we certainly plan to have, you know, like PIMCO doesn't just have one bundle of bonds that they sell, right? That there's not one ETF that trades out there. Like, there's going to be a lot, and we plan to provide a suite of these products with different risk profiles and returns and so on.
Can I just
Yeah, go.
quick question? I guess I may be the dumb one, just a BD founder, but I think some of the other node operators may have the same question. So, like, you know, when you're talking to a lot of the LRTs out there and the AVSs, like, I see the very interesting dynamics, like push-pull. Like, AVSs do not want the operator to onboard, like, too many other AVSs because of the risk spillover, whereas LRTs depends on the maturity of the platform, I guess, or depending on the confidence of the platform. They are looking for operators that have onboarded more AVSs, so that they can actually maximize, you know, for the users, I guess. But, like, how do you, like, you know, I just want to ask Mike and probably, like, you know, Walter as well. But, like, how do you even, like, you know, assess this, like risk, or like how do you even have like framework when you're trying to onboard like AVS? Because as you said, I think you were mentioning that there will be and there are probably, like, you know, a lot of the LRTs that are trying to degen out and onboard as many as AVS as possible, whereas, like, you know, are there's like, you know, any internal, like, you know, framework that you use in order to, like, you know, see how it's going? Because as a node operator, it's a very important question, because, you know, we get this like into a very weird position where AVSs don't want to onboard other AVSs, and when LRTs are asking, hey, how many AVSs are going to onboard, I'm like, I don't know. So
yeah, there's not actually an answer to that. There's lots of people talking about like fancy, you know, risk models, but again, nobody has slashing rules implemented. There's no like frameworks and templates around this stuff, so there is no answer. And it also depends on the design of the LRT protocol. If you have an LRT that's just like wrapping STETH and throwing it into eigenlayer, there's actually not a lot. In that, they're not really choosing which AVSs they're running. They're probably just choosing an operator, and then the operator's, you know, doing kind of whatever they want. In the case of Ether.fi, we do have that granular control where we can say, okay, this operator, we'd like to run this AVS and this many layered AVSs and so on. And, you know, we have a sketch of kind of like what a risk framework might look like, and we're working with Gauntlet, pretty much like everybody else, you know, on like flushing that out. But philosophically, our approach is going to be extremely risk averse in the sense that we are going to whitelist we're not just going to like accept anything. We're only going to work with really high quality AVSs. We are not going to accept any risk that's meaningfully or in any way higher than like Ethereum, you know, consensus risk. And we are going to be very conservative with like overlapping AVSs on the same ETH, because again, to reiterate the point, like the only thing that actually matters for us if we want to have longevity is downside protection. Yield optimization is like a distant second. The only thing we actually care about is downside protection.
Yeah, you want to add some points, Walter?
Yeah, in the end, like a lot of considerations can go into the AVS selection itself. I think Mike covered like a good number of them as well. Like for an LRT to like have that long-term longevity, you have to reduce the probability of these tail risks happening, right? In the end, like the one who does that the best will stay alive the longest. When actually, you know, picking AVSs in the end, it's pretty complex, right? There's a lot of second-order interactions in that sort of calculation, right? Of course, each AVS, you know, the slashing rules are objective, right? You know which rules are, you know, more likely. You know which rules, under which rules, like, you're more likely going to be slashed, which types of rules are not well designed and are rather weak. But you might also have to consider, like, who else is like, securing those AVSs, and particularly, like, who those agents are and what other AVSs are they securing. Like, If those people are getting slashed as well, then that AVS security, despite it having very robust rules, might actually be kind of weak. So you have to consider these aspects as well.
Cool, perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. I think seeing the space evolve over time, and I think there's many different scenarios. We're still very, very early with it, but I'm really looking forward. I think it's going to be a great future. A lot of things happening in the liquid restaking space. I think it's important, node operators and liquid restaking protocols work closely together as well. I think it's important to have very good risk frameworks. I don't think there's like the best scenario or something, and a lot of things we have to find out around the stickiness and so on. But yeah, in that sense, thanks everyone for participating in the panel. Thanks for hosting A41, and thanks for listening.